What's up, world? My name's Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois, and I'm in the Louisiana Cookin Test Kitchen, your authority for all things great out the Bayou State. Today, I am making a classic Cajun Jambalaya. Now, one of the things that I love about jambalaya is that it's a rice-based dish, and anything rice I'm in love with. It's one of those dishes that is just so nostalgic to me. Couple things you need to know about making this classic jambalaya. You need to have a good heavy bottom metal pot. That could be enamel, that could be cast iron, that could be cast aluminum like this Magnolite. But the most important thing is that it's big enough to cook the amount of product that's in there, because you don't want your rice cluttered and packed in too tight, because it won't fluff and every granule won't get cooked all the way. So just make sure that, that you're using the right size pot. This is I believe a 17-quart Magnolite pot. It's the biggest one they make, and it's probably a little too big for what we want to use, but I'd rather have it too big than too small. The first thing we need to do, the way jambalaya gets its iconic color, is by roasting all the meat in this pot. We're gonna start with the andouille sausage, get that crispy, and then move on to the rest of our proteins, developing deep, rich, caramelized proteins. That's gonna flavor the whole jambalaya throughout that cooking process. Let's get to work. So I have a fair amount of vegetable oil here. I'm gonna just make sure that whole bottom of the pot is coated. I'm already at a medium heat, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw this andouille sausage right in. You can cut these in half moons. You can leave them whole. These are quartered. I think just quartered and smaller kind of disperses through the jambalaya better, which I like, but for right now, all we want to do is bring this up to like a good saute, start to brown that sausage, then we'll eventually take that out and move on to the rest of our proteins. Before I move any further, I just want to show you, this, we have a little andouille sausage here and the chicken thigh here. You don't need to use pork shoulder, although I love getting those big hunks of tender pork in my jambalaya, so that's something that I wanted to throw in this recipe. You could put shrimp in this jambalaya. You'd have to add it towards the end and not have the cooking process the way this is. But think about jambalaya and that rice as a vessel to use whatever protein you want. We're from wild game to seafood to something very classic like this. So I have some chicken thigh here. This is a boneless, skinless chicken thigh. And very simply, because remember, we're gonna roast that up in this pan, and it's gonna spend about 45 minutes cooking under broth and steam and so on. I like to just cut these large chunks, and it's basically quartered or cut in 6. That's about 2 pounds of chicken, 2 pounds of pork, and about, 2 pounds of sausage as well. Before that starts cooking too much, let me make sure that fire's on, huh? Yeah, we're getting a little sizzle in there, huh, Rowan? See a little sizzle in there? Getting there. So I'll just cut that andouille sausage in quarters, or right in half first, and then kind of down in quarters like so. And then just give it, those nice little chunks. Comme ça. Throw that right in. Get this last one in. So again, this very classic jambalaya here. I love it. These are the types of jambalayas that I remember, our local church on Sundays doing baked chicken and jambalaya and white beans for $5 in a styrofoam lidded, container. Those are the kind of the memories of my childhood. But to be honest with you, I didn't start making jambalaya till I was out of college. I had failed miserably at making it a number of times in college, and I felt like I had a little bit of a badge taken away from me when it comes to like my Cajun culinary heritage. Like I couldn't check that box for a while. Then finally, once I got out of college, I started cooking it more for family meals at restaurants that I was working at. I would make jambalayas and I would use it to kind of test how I like to make my own jambalayas. And finally, I started to nail it. And I always struggled with just getting that rice cooked properly. And going back to the size of the pot, that ended up being my biggest hurdle, is realizing that I need a bigger pot. I need enough space for this rice dish to do its job. A little bit about the history of jambalaya. Obviously it's a Cajun dish, but it does share some history with paella from the Spanish. And Spanish were part of the kind of founding nations of Louisiana. Of course, there were many different ethnic groups that came into that area of the state or that area of the country and developed Louisiana to what we know of today. And the Spanish, one of the many dishes that they've contributed to Cajun foodways is jambalaya through paella. And when you look at paella recipes, you see a lot of commonalities between paella and jambalaya. Of course, they're cooked a little bit differently, but in terms of the ingredients, they're pretty close. And I think it's always just fun to remember that, you know, Cajun food, as special as it is, it came from somewhere, you know, not originating in that state itself. It was a mixture of all these different ethnicities and countries and people and beliefs and cooking ways coming together in that one pot. And this jambalaya is a pretty good example of what coming together in that pot looks like. I tell you what, that's smelling pretty darn good already. All right, so now that our sausage has browned and rendered, I've shut the heat off. Oh, I've shut the heat down to low for a second. I'm gonna scoop all this sausage out, and you can use a slotted spatula or a slotted spoon. I say slotted because I want to keep that andouille fat and oil in there for my next step. Now remember, I'm on low heat here. I have a fair amount of oil still in that pot. That's looking good. We're ready to go on the meat. If you've cooked some Cajun food, you might be familiar with this process, but likely not. It's something that's still even relatively new to me, that I forget who passed this on to me, but it's an old Cajun guy who had been cooking, you know, these recipes for a long time, and he talked to me about, he said, you ever heard of a sugar roux? And for those who have cooked a lot of Cajun food, you know that most things start with a roux. But in a sugar roux, you have no flour, and you use white sugar instead. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna combine the oil that I have here, medium-low heat, a fair amount of butter. That's a 1/4 pound of butter here. And I'm gonna combine, once that butter is melted, I'm gonna combine that white sugar into this fat and start caramelizing that white sugar. When it starts to get almost like the color of this spoon right here, then I'm gonna throw in my meat. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna just aid in the roastiness and caramelization of that meat and provide a nice little sweet, subtle background to my whole jambalaya, while also adding a nice, robust color in addition. So it's a good little trick. You don't need to do this. You don't need to make a sugar roux, but this little extra step will be, it's like one of those ingredients, one of those steps where when somebody tastes your jambalaya, you're like, what is making this so good? What's making this so different from other jambalayas I've had? It's likely a sugar roux in there that's really aiding in the complexity of those flavors. So once that butter is nice and melted, I'm on medium heat here. You can see it's almost like I'm preparing a roux, right? I have my fat in here, but instead of flour, I'm going white sugar. I'm just gonna slowly start to caramelize and dissolve that white sugar. Making a great jambalaya is all about layering flavors one on top of the other. It's not something you can just mindlessly, throw in the pot and hope it comes out good. It may come out edible, but it won't be good, and it certainly won't be great without building and leveling those flavors into each other. And that's why we started with roasting that andouille. We're building this sugar roux, and now we're gonna add the pork shoulder, and the chicken thighs to this sugar roux slurry. And then we're gonna stir all that in there. At this point, This really just needs to develop and continue to caramelize in the pot together. While that meat roasts in the pot and while it caramelizes, so is that sugar in that sugar roux, just deepening the complexity of what's happening in this pot. All right, it is looking mighty fine in here. You can see that meat is actually starting to candy in this pan, in this pot, and all that roastedness that's happening down there, we want to preserve all that. It's looking really good. We're not going to take this out the pot. We're going to let it continue to fry in this sugar roux mixture, mostly just fat now because that sugar has caramelized and stuck to those proteins. But we're going to add our onions and our garlic right now. We're going to do that first and allow just all those vegetables again to start caramelizing in that fat. I like to add my onion and garlic first before I add any bell pepper and celery, because bell pepper and celery have such a high water content that it'll halt or stop your caramelization process or your vegetables, while onions have a high sugar content with the garlic and they'll caramelize really nicely in that fat. So I always give the onions and garlic a good 10 to 20 minutes of roasting in a pan. That's the same with gumbos and jambalayas and most things that I cook in one pot, where I'm leveling up different flavors and building all those complexities in there. All right, we're creating a really deep, rich mahogany in this pot. I'm ready to move on to throwing my bell peppers, celery, and green onions in there. And you just dump them right in. Same applies. We want to stir this all in and continue to cook this mixture until we're developing more brown caramelized textures and notes within these vegetables as well. Green onions as well. Those are just the bottoms to green onions. And then we're going to stir that in really well. Whew. And that is looking fire right now. I mean, you can just tell this pot has such a great foundation for a delicious jambalaya. And even in this stage, where we're not even halfway through, you know you're building something really special. All right, our bell peppers and celery, they have softened. They look incredible in here. It's time to move on to our next steps. Remember that andouille sausage you roasted in that pan early on? It's going right back into the pot right here. Remember that andouille sausage has a lot of salt, has spice, has all those flavors. We want to keep that in mind when we go ahead and season our broth for this jambalaya. Our rice goes in. We want to make sure that we're taking that rice and getting a good mix into this whole concoction right here. That's going to coat all the grains with all that fat and all those other flavors and sugars that have been happening there. We want to make sure all those grains are coated before we add our liquid. We can now kick this up to high heat, because I know I'm about to put this broth in. And it's going to take a little bit for that jambalaya to come back up to a simmer. Essentially, when we're cooking rice, that's what we want to do. When we add that liquid, we want to bring it up to a boil, then a very low simmer, and let that cook like that. So we got a little bit more time here before we can eat. All those grains look coated. That's about a quart of rice. This is a quart and a half of brown chicken stock. You can see how gelatinous that chicken stock is, how brown and rich it is. We're just leveling and adding flavors and flavors and flavors, step by step by step, into this jambalaya. Mix that around. We've got a kind of a little sachet of thyme that I've tied together. I like tying it together so I don't get stems floating around in my jambalaya and my rice. About 5 bay leaves or so. Gonna mix that in. All right, lastly right here, before it comes up to a boil, we're gonna add some seasoning in this. Before I add the seasoning, I do wanna taste it. Let's give it a taste. I just wanna taste the broth here. Okay, so it has almost no seasoning. It does have some salt and pepper, residual salt and pepper from the meat, but it needs a good bit more spice and seasoning. Add your favorite Cajun seasoning to that. I'm gonna stop right there. Now the trick with jambalaya and seasoning a jambalaya you want that broth to be over seasoned. As that rice cooks, it's gonna soak up all that. And so if you don't over season that broth, your jambalaya could come out a little bland. And obviously nobody likes a bland jambalaya. Give that a stir. I taste it one more time to see where that seasoning's at. Okay, I'm gonna call it right there. It needs to come up to a good simmer, and then I'm gonna lower it, put a lid on it. I'm gonna let it cook for about 45 minutes. But right now, I'm really excited about the potential of this coming together in a really beautiful way. All right, let's make sure that thyme is right in the center of the pot so it can give some fragrance to all that. We can see it's starting to bubble and simmer a little bit right there. We want to get a little bit more aggressive so when we lower that heat, it has a good environment to steam in that pot. All right, that's where we want. I'm not going to stir it anymore until we're ready. I'm just going to give it a nice just cover like this, and my lid's going to go right on, nice and tight. And now I'm creating a good sealed environment for that jambalaya to cook. Now it's on high right now. I'm going to go all the way to as low as I can get it without that fire going off. That looks pretty good right there. All right, so total cook time at this point is around 45 minutes, but in 30 minutes, I will open that lid and check out where the rice is and it's cooking. It may take, because of the size of the pot and I have enough space, it may only take 35 minutes. But you want to give at least 45 minutes to cook, because you could, need a little bit more time to steam in that environment. Right now, we're at a good point where we can just hang out, drink a beer, and wait for that jambalaya to get ready. All right, jambalaya's been cooking for about 35 minutes. We're still seeing some residual steam coming out from underneath this foil, but I have to check it. I got to see the progress of that rice and how it's cooking in this pot. So let's give it a look here. Build that, get that off, and then, ooh, I tell you what, I don't see any undercooked rice. It's looking pretty good. Wow. All right. Best thing to do here is just kind of take that paddle and dig in a little bit. And I can feel it against my paddle here. If I just, wow, that is pretty spot on. It needs a little more time. I'm gonna say another 10 minutes on low heat, and we're gonna be ready to eat. All right, we're about at that 45-minute mark. I have that last residual amount of steam coming through. Let's take a look. Lower that moisture back in there. It's looking good. Now, before I go ahead and fluff this jambalaya, just like you would normal steamed rice, I'm gonna go ahead and add a few of my kind of garnishing ingredients. I got some sliced green onions. Just kind of throw right on top. I will take some parsley and get a rough chop on that. Just fresh flat leaf parsley. Be pretty rustic, just give it a couple turns. Just like so, into the pot. And then what I like to do on the last little bit, and I don't add hot sauce into my jambalaya while it cooks, because acid can sometimes cause rice to cook a little funky when you raise the pH like that. So I'm just going to add it in at the end. That's going to give good pops of vinegar in this very rich and complex dish. And then with your same spoon, some sort of paddle, you just want to go around those edges like so, and just start to fold in that rice into those herbs. There's no tomato in this. There's no darkening liquid. There's just all caramelization coloring this rice, along with a wonderful chicken stock. Now, for those who know, I'm gonna move some of that rice over to the side. Come in here and take a look at this. This is the money. This is the money. Just move it over to the side. This is the part that I like. I kind of let everybody eat their, grab their jambalaya, and I'll take my spoon and start to get that burnt rice from the bottom, that gratin. And this is all over the bottom of the pot. So as it gets eaten, I'm just kind of waiting for people to give me some more room. So I love those little burnt pieces. And you talk to a lot of Louisianians, that is the prize spot of the jambalaya. So to plate this, you can get this. Let's get this thyme out of the way. Like that. Get him out of the way. All right. Very simply, it's ready to go. It's seasoned. It's that one pot kind of meal right here. Just get it right on that plate. And if you're feeling generous, go ahead and add a little bit of that burnt stuff, that sticky stuff on the bottom to your friend's plate. That's it, man. That's a classic Cajun jambalaya. Yo, that's hitting the spot. One of the best jambalayas I've ever made. You can get the full recipe down below. I'm Chef Jean Paul. I'm out.